Joining us is Sara Carter, is a investigative reporter, Fox News contributor. Greg Jarrett, 3 weeks and running, the author of the New York Times bestseller, #1 bestseller, The Russian Hoax. Welcome both of you to the program. Sara, let's start with two of your reports here.
Well, I think there's just so much happening today, and I expect it to get a lot busier as the weeks come up, Sean, because there is a strong belief now, and President Trump himself has made a couple of statements already that he will declassify 20 pages that were held top secret and classified of the Fisa, of the Carter Page Fisa warrant. Now remember, over 400 pages have been turned over, heavily redacted. The Fisa warrant itself was heavily redacted, and there was a big battle between Congress and the DOJ over the last 3 or 4 months. In particular, was when they really intensified over getting these 20 pages basically redacted so that the American people, unredacted so that the American people could see them, and then they could expose what was actually happening. We do know that a number of lawmakers have already made statements that there was significant exculpatory information that was withheld from the FISC court, that is from the top secret court in the land, that the FBI and DOJ purposefully withheld that information because they knew about it. And a lot of that had to do with Bruce Orr and his relationship with Christopher Steele. I have also been told, and this is new news, that there is going to be information in those documents that will shock all of us, something that we will not expect. Now, because it is highly
Are you
classified,
talking about the 20 pages or...
I'm talking about the 20 pages.
Well, Sara, I know you've long enough. We've now been on this case for 20 years, and when you say something is going to be shocking, you already know what it is.
I wish I could tell you. I wish I did know what it is, but because I have an idea, and that was only from my personal guessing from our work and the research that we've all been doing. Greg Jarrett,
Can you give us like a headline what it might be about or who it might be about?
I was told it's something that will shock the conscience.
Okay, let's go to Greg Jarrett. Look, I respect the fact that Sara protects her sources, and there's a whole process by which you get to break these news stories. I've heard the same thing Sara has heard. The other thing, too, that I'm hearing, Sara, is beyond the 20 pages that there are a number of 302s that could be released, and there has been a lot of discussion almost from day one that some of them have been altered.
That's absolutely correct. Those 302s are vitally important. Whether or not they have been altered, that remains to be seen. I know that the most important 302s that they're looking for right now are Bruce Orr's 302 interviews with the FBI. Remember, this is something that the Senate Judiciary Committee has been fighting tooth and nail since July to try to get these 302s out there. They believe there's extraordinary information in there, information that the American public needs to be aware of, information that Congress needs to have to conduct oversight, and in order to actually see what was going on, Sean, because we have a system here, and it appears, based on all the evidence that has come out, that the FBI violated, just as Meadows said in his letter, critical violations, critical protocol, and possibly violated the law. And I know Greg Jarrett can explain that in the legal terms, but there is a lot of information here that the American public is still not aware of, and I believe that in the next few weeks, what has happened over the last 2 years will become crystal clear to the American public.
So this will be the glue that ties it all together.
Absolutely.
Greg Jarrett.
I'm hearing the same thing from my sources who I'm pretty confident are different from your sources, but they're saying...
You don't like my sources? Are you questioning my sources? What's up with that?
My sources are better than your sources. No, I don't want to get into that, but my sources are telling me the exact same thing, that this will blow the Russia hoax wide open, and that simultaneously the fact that Andrew Weissman was in on the hoax, was well aware of the improper illegal use of the dossier to spy, has now irrevocably tainted Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, and now that is imploding. And my theory is this is why Mueller has finally relented in his demands to interview the president, and that he'll take a few written questions on collusion only, not obstruction, and wrap this whole thing up.
Well, I think that's a big development. Do you think that is a retreat by the special counsel?
Absolutely, because he knows it was bad enough that Peter Strzok tainted Bob Mueller's investigation and was fired because of it. But now we have learned that Andrew Weissman was in on the hoax. He was a participant. He knew. Why?
Well, in the case of Strzok, we know that Mueller finally said, get out. Why is he not doing it in the case of Andrew Weissman, who I always thought you can't have any objectivity or any sense of fairness when you have Jeannie Ray and Andrew Weissman on your team?
Well, I think Mueller is hoping to wrap this thing up so he doesn't have to fire Weissman. They're all thick as thieves, these guys. Comey, and, Weissman.
Tell us how you really
Mueller,
feel. Yeah.
And Strzok. No, they are. And Rosenstein, they're a little cabal of power that has wielded that power in violation of the law repeatedly. And now, Mueller's been caught. He had a band of, 17 partisans that he put together for this investigation. Andrew Weissman's the head of the list, and now Weissman has been implicated by Orr. So Weissman would have known Steele was not credible, virulently biased against Trump. The dossier was fabricated, and yet they went after Donald Trump using that document.
Does it sound to you like Bruce Orr told the truth? Is that why we got here?
Mm-hmm. I think so, because he's in legal jeopardy. I mean, Orr knows that what he did in withholding information about his wife's role in creating the phony dossier is potentially a crime. He was profiting financially from that document while peddling it as useful and truthful, and it wasn't. And it's a felony to use your office for personal financial gain, yet that's what he was doing. So now he's singing like a canary because he's trying to save his own butt. And
that's a great point, trying to save his own butt. But, Sean, if you read the letter from Meadows, what's so incredible here is that Bruce Orr knew there was a conflict of interest. He documented that. And people knew that he felt there was a conflict of interest with his involvement in this investigation. So he himself implicates himself.
And why didn't he tell his own Department of Justice? He says he told the FBI, and more importantly, why did he remain in contact with somebody who apparently testified to the House committees last week that he knew was not credible, Christopher Steele?
Absolutely. And let's just go back to another thing. His boss, Sally Yates, signed off on the Fisa, the first Fisa. That was his boss. Are you telling me she didn't know? I would want to question her if I was Congress. I would want to question Bruce Orr again. I would want to get to the bottom of that. And the very last Fisa, that fourth Fisa renewal, was signed off by none other than Rod Rosenstein. So Rod Rosenstein had all of that information. He signed off on that Fisa. This 20 pages, this is Rosenstein's Fisa. This is Rosenstein's Fisa. Yeah. Nobody else's. So when it comes out, when they declassify these 20 pages of the final Fisa, which was a culmination of all those other Fisas, the other three that they had put in, this is Rosenstein's Fisa. So not only is Weissman already discredited the Mueller special counsel investigation, but Rosenstein himself, who is supposed to be overseeing this, is the guy who signs off on the final Fisa?
You might be giving us hints into what the 20 pages could reveal. I'm very interested in what you're saying. All right, stay right there. All right, as we continue, Greg Jarrett and Sara Carter with us. A lot of big developments here. I want to go back to the heart of this letter that was sent by Mark Meadows, and he talks about a transcribed interview with Bruce Orr raising grave concerns related to his role as the conduit between Christopher Steele, the FBI, and as Steele compiled an opposition research dossier on behalf of Hillary and her campaign, and how he revealed that he had recorded the status of his wife, Nellie, the contractor for Fusion GPS. Again, they were again building the dossier, but I think the most important development here is the connection that Bruce Orr would take Christopher Steele's information, and we now know was feeding it to Andrew Weissman, the lead guy on Robert Mueller's team. So you have a direct line for Hillary bought and paid for lies about Russia being fed to the Mueller investigation. It's almost unimaginable. Greg,
it's almost like you can't even comprehend it. You couldn't even write this if you tried, because people wouldn't believe that all these connections would just be falling on top of each other once we start unraveling, like you used to say, the onion, peeling back the layers of the onion or unraveling this ball of yarn. Let's go back, Sean, and this was something that I put out a little bit last night on your show when we were talking about it. But remember, it was Andrew Weissman. Remember that? Who was basically contacted the AP or had made contact with the Associated Press on the Paul Manafort case. Remember that? Well, he was still head of the Criminal Fraud Division and set up a meeting between the FBI and the Associated Press. We broke this story on your show and was trying to get or share information on Paul Manafort before he was ever appointed to the special counsel. Now, the reason I bring that up is because the FBI agents that were sitting in that interview about a month and a half before he was appointed to the special counsel sent a letter to the Department of Justice, which has never been released yet, but we know it exists, sent a letter complaining about Weissman, complaining about the fact that they put him in front of the AP. Apparently Weissman had told the FBI that the Associated Press was going to share information with him and with them. And the Associated Press said, no way, we're not sharing any information. But apparently, according to my sources, Weissman was actually sharing information with the Associated Press. So nobody's ever gotten down to the bottom of that story. But Weissman has been involved in this from the beginning. From the time he was head of the Criminal Fraud Division, he was getting information from Moore. And remember that note Orr put at the bottom of his, he had been writing these handwritten notes, and he was specifically saying, there's basically nothing on Trump, but we got to keep going after him.
Stay right there. We'll continue with Sarah Carter, Greg Jarrett on the other side of this break. And now, here's Sean.
Mr. President, a lot of people are frustrated. A lot of your supporters are frustrated with the DOJ, with Jeff Sessions. There are rumors that you're going to fire him after the midterms and Rosenstein. They also want these documents. They're wondering if you will use your power to get these documents released.
At the right time, I think I'm going to have to do the documents. I didn't want to, but I think I'm going to have to. There's such corruption. Before I got here. It's from before I got here. It's the Obama administration. And you look at what happened. They surveilled my campaign. It's very simple. The Fisa report, the phony fake.
Rosenstein signed the last Fisa report.
It bothers me. It's always bothered me.
Will you fire him? Will you fire Sessions?
Well, I'll tell you what. As I've said, I wanted to stay uninvolved. But when everybody sees what's going on in the Justice Department, I always put justice now with quotes, it's a very, very sad day.
The way we operate in the Department of Justice, if we're going to accuse somebody of wrongdoing, we have to have admissible evidence and credible witnesses. We need to be prepared to prove our case in court. And we have to affix our signature to the charging document. That's something that not everybody appreciates. There's a lot of talk about FISA applications. And many people that I see talking about it seem not to recognize what a FISA application is. A FISA application is actually a warrant, just like a search warrant. In order to get a FISA search warrant, you need an affidavit signed by a career federal law enforcement officer who swears that the information in the affidavit is true and correct to the best of his knowledge and belief. And that's the way we operate. And if it's wrong, sometimes it is, if you find out there's anything incorrect in there, that person is going to face consequences.
I wonder if he's talking about himself. That was Rod Rosenstein back in May. I wonder if he's going to eat those words at some near future date, perhaps. Anyway, glad you're with us. 25 down till the top of the hour. Mark Meadows sending a letter to the DOJ, the Attorney General, demanding the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, the recently appointed DOJ Attorney, John Huber, investigate what we now know to be Bruce Orr, and, of course, his connections to Christopher Steele, and now their attempt to, apparently there was some type of collusion relationship that was ongoing with Andrew Weissman in terms of information that was being backdoored or being the conduit for Christopher Steele to give his phony dossier information to Andrew Weissman, who was the lead guy on Robert Mueller's team. I think that pretty well sums it up. Greg Jarrett and Sarah Carter continue with me. Greg.
Yeah, you've summed it up quite nicely. This is a corrupt endeavor to frame Donald Trump using faulty documents that were knowingly false and fabricated, false intelligence. And all of the people, including Rod Rosenstein, Andrew Weissman, all part of the Mueller investigation were involved. Peter Strzok as well. And so I think when these documents are declassified by the president, maybe as early as tomorrow, although it will then take several days for them to be released, I think it'll blow the whole thing wide open. And I think Robert Mueller's investigation, which has already been corrupted and tainted, will implode, and he knows it, which is why he's trying to wrap it up now, conceding that...
I'm not so sure that that's necessarily... Is he trying to wrap it up, or did he want to subpoena the president, and it was the Justice Department that said, no, this has gone on far enough, we're not going to approve that tactic, and then he had to come back with, well, we may accept some written answers from the president.
Well... Oh. You can see Bob Mueller and Rod Rosenstein sitting down with a case of the for reals, as I call it, and saying, what are we going to do now to get ourselves out of this?
Well, wait a minute. Why would they finally do it? I mean, we already have gone through the history of Andrew Weissman. Nobody seemed to give a damn up to this point. Nobody gave a flying rip that the Clinton Foundation lawyer, Jeannie Ray, was appointed by Robert Mueller. Nobody cared that he had Strzok on his team. Nobody cared that it's, 15 of the 16 people are all Democratic donors to Obama and Hillary.
Nobody implicated Andrew Weissman until Bruce Orr did a week ago. And armed with that information and knowledge that the president was going to declassify these incriminating documents, they realized that their corrupt acts were about to be exposed.
Do you believe it? Let me ask Sarah, do you agree with Greg's theory on this? Because I'm not so sure. I'm more, look, maybe I'm more skeptical.
No, look, I do, only for these reasons. I believe that they just never expected that there would be people out there with the tenacity, like Greg Jarrett, like what we've been doing, other reporters out there, Daily Caller, a few others, not many, to continue to pound this into the ground, to continue to search for the truth. And every day, more and more information came out. I don't believe when Robert Mueller accepted that position, from his friends, by the way, to be the special counsel. I think in the beginning he was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I don't think he knew for a hot minute how bad it was. I think he understood that there were some issues and that he was going to maybe save some butt, like Greg said, He's probably going to go out there and save a couple of his friends to, fight for Comey.
So the last thing he's going to do is bringing in Jerome Corsi to try and, entrap Roger Stone? I mean, is that the next leg in this whole thing?
I know, it's just ridiculous. There's nothing to go after. This is what's so crazy. He has to try to make cases to put some notches on his belt to just salvage his own legacy. He jumped into the
I don't know.
nest.
I have never, ever believed, and I'm listening to both of you, and both of you have been right the whole time, and I think this is the first time our point of view may be diverging here. I've seen no evidence at all whatsoever that they are ever going to stop until they can manufacture some crime or some roadmap to impeachment that will be their report that would be issued either before the election or after the election should the Democrats win, or maybe to assist them in winning.
Well,
sure, they want to, Sean. That's their dream. They want to. That's their dream. They just don't have the evidence.
Yeah, Greg?
Two things in the report will be, one, exculpatory of Bob Mueller. He'll try to justify his existence and his work is legitimate. Look at all of the criminal charges we brought. We got a conviction on Manafort and a couple of guilty pleas. But the second part will be that he will give a little tidbit of information for liberals and progressives to pursue an impeachment proceeding. He'll say something that the president's behavior was, I don't know, I'll just grab a word, suspicious in in how he dealt with General Flynn and the firing of Comey. He doesn't need to try to indict a sitting president because he knows he can't. He can't go any further than that other than to file a report. He wants to give a little something to Congress, and that'll be the two parts of the report.
Listen, I think that is definitely a strong possibility. What happens to, we just played the tape of Rod Rosenstein. Whatever happens to a guy like him in all of this?
Oh, Rod Rosenstein, I think realizes that he's in deep trouble because he signed off on a Fisa warrant, in his own words, vouching for its authenticity when he either knew or should have known that it was a false document. He didn't do his due diligence, or he'll blame somebody else. He was misled, or he trusted somebody else's diligence. But the fact is, he affixed his signature to it, so he is ultimately responsible. So he's looking at things like abuse of power, depriving somebody of their rights under color of law. He's looking at perjury. I mean, that signature is under penalties of perjury. False and misleading statements, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to defraud the government. So, Rod Rosenstein, I suspect will be looking at some serious potential legal jeopardy, which is one of the reasons why he and Sessions will likely be fired.
Do you think that anybody gets indicted in all of this, and will there be any charges against anybody, or is it if Robert Mueller says, okay, we look bad in this, we're gonna land the plane safely, we'll give you an out, you give us an out? Is that what's going to happen, and everybody moves on happily ever after, and we don't have equal justice?
If there is an honest prosecutor who presents the incriminating evidence in front of a grand jury, I think there will be indictments, yes.
Of who?
Well, first of all, look at all the people who signed off on the warrant applications using phony evidence. That's James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates, Rod Rosenstein. If Peter Strzok contributed to it, he's in jeopardy too. So just the use of the dossier to spy is serious felonies.
Mm-hmm. Sarah?
I agree. I think that if John Huber does his job, if the Inspector General collects enough evidence and refers it, that there will be prosecutions. I think more importantly, Sean, I hope and I believe that if another Attorney General is put in place, that they should appoint a second special counsel to investigate all of this, including Hillary's role in the past and her involvement with the BleachBit and email server scandal, everything. We need to clean our house out, and we need to know the truth. The American people deserve that.
I think if that were to happen, that would also mean we have to go back to the beginning, and the beginning is Hillary Clinton and the crime she committed and the fix that was put in the investigation into her. We also now know for a fact that it was Peter Strzok that wrote the initial draft on Hillary Clinton, which means it's James Comey that made the adjustment from, the legal standard, as we have discussed many times, into a non-legal standard. He's the one that threaded the needle on July 5th when he exonerated her, only 3 days after Peter Strzok interviewed her, but the fix was in. And then you go on from there, and then we have to talk about FISA court abuse. And if we're really going to get to the truth, then we've got to look at the massive surveillance abuse, not only within the Trump campaign, but the surveillance of Americans, the unmasking of Americans, the 350% increase against American citizens in an election year. And if we're really going to care about the truth, and we really care about Russia and Russian influence, well, then we've got to ask the question, well, we had a spy inside of Putin's network for all the years that they were involved in bribery and extortion and money laundering and kickbacks. And even though we had a undercover, FBI agent watching the whole thing and reporting back to his bosses the whole thing, Vladimir Putin was able to achieve his dream, which was a foothold into the uranium market in America, and then follow the money after that point, and all the people associated with that deal end up donating up to $145 million back to the Clinton Foundation. So if we really care about equal justice under the law, are we all going to do we really believe we're going to get to the bottom of all that? Because I don't think there's a shot in hell.
Well, that's why the first step would be to get rid of.
But I am not cynical.
Sessions and Rosenstein. No, you're absolutely right. And because Sessions, among his first duties, was to reopen the Hillary Clinton email case. The evidence was obvious against her. She committed 110 different felonies representing 110 classified documents on her private, unauthorized, unsecured email server. And I'm sure the Chinese and the Russians had all those documents, and probably a bunch of guys in their basements here in the United States. I mean, it was easy to access that information. She jeopardized national security, and other people have been prosecuted for a whole lot less for doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. That case should have been reopened. Sessions didn't do it. Yet another reason why Sessions should be fired.
Hey, Sean, thanks a lot. this turning into I'm sorry, guys, but this is like a broken record to all of us million of like-minded people that are out here watching this thing happen, watching rule of law be kicked to the side like it's absolutely nothing. And as everybody's waiting, something has got to happen. The chief law enforcement officer of our nation is sitting on his hands doing nothing while it's evident to all of us that horrible things that are happening here to try to steer our government into the direction that the majority of the voters of the country didn't want to go. What is going to happen? And when is it going to happen? What can the president do to right this thing before things get really ugly? What can be done?
Let's get some answers. We'll start with Sarah. How do you answer that?
For Steve, this is a question that everybody has been asking. Everybody is so frustrated with. It's almost as if they want to exhaust us so that we stop investigating, so that we don't talk about this anymore and allow it to happen. I think the most important thing is, one, Steve, we need the president to declassify those documents. The truth needs to get into the hands of the American people first and foremost. Second, these investigations need to continue, and unfortunately, if come November people aren't voting, these investigations will cease to continue. On the congressional side, we need to hold the DOJ accountable. We need to say, what is John Huber doing? We want to make sure that he's doing his job and that Inspector General Michael Horowitz gets out that report expediently and with all the facts, so that we understand what's going on.
Quick answer from Greg, and we got to let you go. Thank you, Steve.
Well, governance of, by, and for the people is only as sound and effective as the people who run it. It's susceptible to abuse and dishonesty, and that's exactly what happened in the Russian hoax. So these people need to be replaced. New and honest people should be their replacements.
All right, thank you both for being with us. We appreciate it. Greg, Sarah, great work.